The new thing also has the support of your conscious mind, but the old thing has the support of your ego, way more than your conscious mind does. And so it's a bit of a battle. In the beginning, it's very challenging. At least in my experience, it was. But over time, it became easy. And it was like that with every habit. And through that, you understand the extent of the habit.
You once said, or you was referring to someone else, point me to a millionaire and I'll point you to a criminal.
Yes.
How much do you feel the sentiment of business kind of like every man for himself, every woman for himself, but it's also very personal at the same time?
Yeah. 100%. But it's about the team at the end of the day. You're only as good as your team. Because there's only but so much success that you're going to experience when you're home. So, yes, each individual, well, the aim is for each individual to be satisfied on the team. Sometimes an individual on the team takes an L so that the team can win. That's part of it too. In the past, the teams were very large, but in the future, the teams may be very small. Because of the leverage that technology gives you. At one point, the objective was, okay, I want to build a big organization so that we can have the greatest impact that we can possibly have and make the most money that we can possibly have. That we can possibly make. The future is not about having to employ 1,000 people in order to make $1 billion. The future is, how do I employ 200 people and make $1 billion? How do I have a 60-person team and be a $350 million company? If not less people. Because you can leverage technology in that way. Or at least that seems to be the way that we're headed toward in the foreseeable future. So yes, it is every man for himself, but at the same time, it's a team dynamic. And it's every man for himself because you wake up every day and decide that you still want to be a part of that team because it serves you. And you understand how you can serve the team. So you understanding how you can serve the team is what makes it a team. You understanding how the team can serve you is what makes it every man for himself. So it's both of those concepts at play at the same time. So yes, it is every man for himself, and it is a team dynamic as well. And you're only as good as your team. And the team is only as good as the weakest link. That's why you don't want to have any B players at your table. Only A players. That's kind of what my whole debacle was with myself last night. Whoever's at the table is at the table because I chose them. This is a reflection of me. So if I'm not happy with what I'm seeing, never mind the people starting at the table. I need to change myself. I need to really step into a position where I'm performing at the highest possible level. Because then I'll attract different people. But part of performing at the highest possible level is moving away from people that you may have developed strong feelings for. It's like a CEO firing someone. That doesn't necessarily feel good, but it's a requirement. It's part of their job. But it's also important to highlight the part of yourself that thought hiring that person was a good idea and firing that perspective that you had. So that you no longer continue to find yourself in a situation where you will constantly find yourself in a situation for at least for a little while where you have to let people go and accept it as part of it. You should notice yourself hiring a higher caliber of a person who's going to offer higher quality work over time. And the only way to do that is for you to do that. It's for you to set the tone as the individual that's leading the way. And the only way for you to set the tone for someone else is for you to set the tone in your own life first. Because that's what informs the rest of your decisions. And I see that in myself.
Getting back to reviewing the people in your environment and in your team. How do you construct a team in the first place?
How do you construct a team? Well, one, you create an environment that attracts a certain type of person. But you first have to establish what kind of person that is that you're interested in attracting. That's based on what you want to accomplish. Excuse me. And what kind of person you are. Why do you want to accomplish that? And the more you can understand your why, the more you can understand why someone would want to get behind what you're doing. And what kind of person is it that wants to get behind what you're doing? How do you create an environment that attracts that person? So that you don't have to spend excessive amount of resources chasing that person. But rather bringing that person to you. And once you have that idea, it's also important to make sure that you have an infrastructure that can support that team. And creating a culture that is rooted in improving the people on your team, celebrating their improvements, celebrating where they are now, not demonizing them for failure.
What are some key aspects when it comes to assessing your team?
Key aspects when it comes to assessing your team. How much do they understand the vision? What is the emotion that they have behind the vision? What is their why? How do they see themselves fitting into what you're doing? What is going to be their contribution toward the vision that you have for this organization? And that way you understand why they're interested in following you and how interested they are in following you. And what is it exactly that they bought into? Also helps you understand who could potentially end up being a leader on your team. And how would they lead? What kind of person would be interested in following them?
What's the difference between being rich and wealthy?
Rich is really just making a lot of money every year. So you have a high income, high net income, but your assets don't necessarily have a high income. meaning you don't necessarily live a lavish life off the interest of your assets. You have to actually go out and work in order to acquire the financial resources that you acquire. So let's say someone is making $10 million a year net. That's a pretty high income, some would say. Right? That person is someone that most people will probably classify as rich. But when you become wealthy is when you can make 10, 20, $100 million a year without leaving your house. That's the income from the interest of your assets, not from sweat equity. That's wealth.
Which one would you want to strive for?
Definitely wealth.
Are there any activities you need to partake in order to accumulate wealth?
A lot. Business. The activities that require the activities that are required to actually gain financial resources, providing value in the marketplace. There's a bunch of different ways that you can do that. Right? But providing enough of it to acquire enough assets to be able to live off the interest of your assets. And then based on the amount of value that you provide, you can accumulate enough assets not only to live off them, but to live lavishly. Then you're wealthy. But wealth is about more than just money. It's also about power. You acquire enough wealth to acquire power, then you use the power to protect your wealth. That's why you have lobbyists in the United States that can speak with politicians or potential politicians or people who are potentially going to be in office about their interests. And if their interests align, then they can support them financially. If they don't align, then they don't support them financially. The financial resources you have grant you the power to have these conversations with these prestigious individuals within these prestigious locations so that you can protect the financial resources that you have and hopefully acquire more. And hopefully you're doing that for the greater good of society as a whole. Because essentially that's what businesses are meant for. To provide value to society.
You think everybody that's rich provides value?
I think everybody that's rich provides a perceived value. They provide a service or a product that during the lifetime of that service or product is perceived as valuable. Whether they actually provide real, long-lasting value. It's debatable. But I would say yes. Because if nothing else, you learn that it's not valuable. And learning what's not valuable is valuable. Knowing what not to do, knowing what not to purchase, knowing what product or service does not add value to your life, although it may be available on the market, is very important. Just like knowing what is valuable, what does add value to your life, is very important. So even if the value that it provides is indirect, there's still some value there. Depending on how we perceive it as a society is what determines whether or not that company is profitable.
You once said, or you was referring to someone else, point me to a millionaire and I'll point you to a criminal.
Yes. You do have people who believe that every successful business person every successful capitalist, I should say, is a criminal. I don't share that sentiment. But it depends on how you look at it. Some people look at it globally, where the argument is there are a limited amount of resources. So one person's gain is another person's loss. Some people think that's not necessarily true. The objective is to find the opportunity. So you can look at someone else's gain as your lesson to learn how to provide value on your side and thus gain for yourself. Can't be afraid to break some of the rules. Or at least find loopholes. That was advice from Arnold Schwarzenegger. Don't be afraid to break the rules.
Did you watch this documentary?
Not the latest one on Netflix. His story is pretty fascinating, though.
What about
From the
it?
outside looking at, like just the stats, the bullet points. It's pretty impressive.
It's a very wide range.
Super. But it just shows you what's possible. Especially when there's a high level of intensity. He has that. He has a very high level of intensity in what he does. At least what he did. Salute to him. I haven't watched the documentary yet. I'm sure it's dope though.
How deeply should you understand money? The history of it, the systems, the banking, the taxes, how to do it in a way that you don't have to pay as much as they ask you to.
They only ask you to pay the amount that you owe. So the objective is to minimize the amount that you owe as a business owner. I would say everyone should try to learn as much as they possibly can about finances, about money itself, whether you're a business owner or not. If you're a business owner, ideally you want to have a great bookkeeper, CFO. And they're the people that actually know about business finance or corporate finance in and out. The founder doesn't really need to know as much as the CFO does, usually. Sometimes the founder is the CFO. It's a different story. But I would say every human should know about finance, at least at a basic level. But if you're in business, one of the goals should be to have an advanced understanding of finance and the history of money. Try to learn as much as you possibly can about it. Definitely.
You think AI will replace the human touch?
No. But I do wonder if we will eventually get to a point where most of society won't yearn for the human touch.
What makes you say that?
It's a question. It's not a statement. I'm not saying that we'll get to that space. I'm saying I wonder if we will get to that space. In other words, I'm just as curious.
What do you think?
I think there's a big chance. I think there's a good chance. We just seem to want to get the job done or want to get the result very quickly. It's less about the process and the flaws of what's being created, making it beautiful. And more about the lack of flaw. That makes it beautiful. So, yeah. The human touch is the flawed aspect of it. That's what makes it different. In most creation. So, for example, if we just care about listening to music, and it's the same 4 notes that create a hit record, we can have AI create 1,000 different variations of that and build a song around it. That's perfectly synced. Every instrument is perfectly synced with one another. Put a voice behind it. And that can be that. Especially from a creative perspective. Because much of what we may consider as art has become just part of the scenery. For example, music. For a lot of people, music is really just background noise. It sets the tone. It creates a vibe. But some people don't even notice that it's on. They understand the vibe is there, but they don't notice that the music is playing. Or they walk into a venue and it looks very artsy and stuff. They may not notice the paintings. They see it as a collective. Unless there's something that's really standing out that's different. poetry is not that popular. People may like the way it sounds and it flows well, but are they really dissecting it and really trying to figure out what it means? Maybe not. Interesting. Yeah. Poetry kind of has like a cult following. And it's like that with most forms of art, so it seems. At least the ones we got to think about. Otherwise, we like it and we don't really know why we like it. Like fashion. We just think it looks nice, but we don't. And we want to express ourselves through that look, but we're not exactly clear on what we're expressing. We're not exactly clear on what we're saying at all times. That piece just resonates with a person, and so they wear it. So if you engage in something without really knowing why you're engaging in it, it's kind of like the background of your life. It sets the tone, but you don't. It's there, but it's almost like it's not. It doesn't grab enough of your attention for you to really care to understand it. But when it's not there, you notice it. So if that's the case, then do we even notice the human touch? Or could it have been made by something else?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Or could it as well been made by AI? Because we don't really understand it anyway. We just like it. And at some point, AI will know everything we like. It's like the algorithm. But instead of having it for one platform, we have it across platforms, across societies, across industries. Seems reasonable. Doesn't mean it will happen, but it seems reasonable.
On a different note, why do you think that societies that are not touched by Western culture seem the most happy?
Less distraction. Distraction can confuse a person as to what's important. It can also lend itself well to imagination. But imagination in a way that's not necessarily helpful directly. Because it may not be real. When you have less distraction, you focus on the things that are actually real. Real human connection, real interaction with someone else. Really caring about that person as a person. At least theoretically. Because we also don't really know what it means to be happy for every individual. criteria for an emotion is seemingly fluid. It changes depending on who you ask, even though the emotion is the same. So, yes, we can say progress makes people happy, but people want different things. We know what progress means, but people want different things. And we consider progress differently depending on the circumstance and depending on the person. It's also, we have to be careful with those types of metrics because one, what is happy? Two, who's measuring these metrics? And is it fair? If we're saying people are happier in Western society or people are happier in Eastern society, how do we know exactly? Is it based on suicide rate? Like they say, Finland is the happiest country in the world. They also have the highest suicide rate. That makes sense then, right? The only people that are left are the people who are happy. It doesn't seem like you have the happiest country in the world because the people who weren't happy are no longer living. So we got to be a little bit careful with those types of metrics.
There's a saying that I thought of.
So you have to say it.
All time is free time.
All time is free time.
Because at all times you're free to do whatever you want to do. Unless you're, of course, in a penitentiary, obviously. Where you like, where it came from was I was very busy at certain times when I was doing my internship, working out in the studio all the time. I was like, man, I don't have any free time. And I was thinking, nobody's forcing me to do any of these things. These are my decisions. I'm free to do whatever I want to do. Anything. Meaning, let's say, some people say, like, oh, you gotta work this many jobs to live in this expensive city. You don't gotta live in this city. You chose to live in the city, and with that came these obligations. You could have also lived in a hut somewhere.
That's a fact.
So all time is free time. Yeah.
Or all time is borrowed time. Because you don't have an unlimited amount of it. So perhaps you will want to use it to the best of your ability. So you can make the time that you actually have count. And essentially who you're paying the time back to or is the next generation. You pay it back to God by paying your experiences forward to the next generation. Which is the concept of legacy. Leaving behind something for people to use that somehow enhances their lives. Yes, perhaps you may have the freedom to choose what you want to do with your time, but you have the burden of being obligated to do something worthwhile to improve the lives of the next generation.
What do you think is a right amount to spend on your appearance?
Depends on how much money you make.
As a percentage?
Depends on how much money you make. If you make $50,000 a year, a lot higher. It's going to be a lot higher of a percentage of that you spend on yourself compared to if you make 50 million a year. And it also depends on your identity. LeBron James will probably spend way more money seemingly on his appearance. But it's really not on his appearance only, it's also on his body, the functionality of his body, the capacity of his capability than the average millionaire or billionaire may spend. And that's not even counting clothes and haircuts and accessories and those types of things. That's all of it is a part of your appearance. The healthier you are, the better you look. So indirectly, your health becomes a part of your appearance as well. So it really depends on how much money you're making and what your identity is. You identify as an athlete, that's going to be a different tab than someone who doesn't. Chances are.
For the average person making $50K a year, trying to upgrade their life?
Spend everything you can afford to spend to upgrade your life. Doing the things that actually move the needle. To some extent, that's going to be your physical appearance, depending on what it is that you want to do. In some realms of life, it doesn't really matter so much. In other realms, it really does. If you make $50,000 a year as a female who wants to be a model, that's different from a male making $50,000 a year, but he wants to build the next Facebook. From an appearance perspective, the demand to upkeep your appearance is very different depending on what you want to do with your life. Or what you want to do in your profession for the foreseeable future.
How do you analyze the market to see where the need is?
How do you analyze the market to see where a need is? There are multiple ways to do that. You can read a lot. Typically, that's how you do it. Consume a lot of information. That's a rather tedious process. Typically, you can go off of your experiences if you really want to find a loophole in a market that makes sense to you, to really develop a service around or a product to fulfill. Otherwise, you have no aim. You're randomly seeking a potential problem that may not actually be a problem that's worth investing in. But you may not actually know that unless you have some experience in that field. You can consume a lot of information, but I would say try to experience more, or at least lean on your experiences more in this regard.
What do you think is the best way to, some of the best ways to rejuvenate from periods of hard work, exam weeks, high stake negotiations, whatever?
It depends on the person as well. It really depends on what you're into and what your body responds most to. Some people really like the sauna or the steam room. Some people rather massages. Some people don't really need a massage, steam room, or sauna. They want to go on a vacation. For some people, it's food. For some people, it's shopping. Shopping really gives them a lot of energy. It really depends.
Is there like a silver lining?
In activity, no. In feeling, yes. Relaxation. The feeling of no stress. The feeling of accomplishment. The feeling of acknowledgement.
There was a report that came out, funnily enough, by WeTransfer that said that 70% of the creative industry experiences a burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that too. To which I wonder, like these people that have like very high goals and ambitions, moving to big cities where everything's fast speed and a lot of things are going on, a lot of opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
How can you stay ambitious, motivated, hardworking, outwork your competition, still stay healthy long enough? Well, forever.
You have to know yourself. Just about everything comes back to that. Self-awareness. Knowing what works for you and what doesn't. Some people can stay up 20 hours a day. Some people need 8 hours of sleep. If they don't get 8 hours of sleep, they don't function well. It doesn't matter that they got 8 hours yesterday. They need 8 hours every day. Some people need 8 hours every 2 days, maybe even every 3 days. They can pull that off for about 5 or 6 years. Some people cannot. Some people can go eat once a day. Some people need to eat 3-4 times a day. What types of food do you need to eat? That changes based on the person. So a lot of it is self-awareness. What works for one doesn't work for the other. Some people. But you have to know yourself. Everything starts with that. And ends with that. Self-awareness. How many hours can you work? How many hours can you concentrate? What do you care to focus on? Why do you care to focus on that? What do you need to eat? How often do you need to eat? Who you need to eat it with? The time you need to be in bed? What temperature you like to sleep with? How heavy does a blanket have to be? Do you need a blanket? All of these vary from very extremely simple things to very extremely important things. But it all depends on the person. It changes depending on the person.
My case, right? I have a hard time concentrating for a long time. Reading for extended periods of time. Is that something, and the goal is to become more knowledgeable, become more successful, transform? Is that something I could and should work on? Or is it something that I should work around?
It depends on what you want. Do you really want to be knowledgeable? What do you want to be knowledgeable in? Perhaps the things that you're reading, you don't have a long attention span to read because you don't really care about what you're reading. Maybe you want to care about it, but you don't actually care about it. So perhaps you can, if you think it's important, obviously you do, or you probably wouldn't want to care about it. Perhaps you can connect it to something that you actually like to do, or like to read about, or want to know more about. Right? For example, if I want to know about finances, well, finances are extremely boring to me, but I like skiing, then I can learn about the business of skiing. And that can be a way that I can squeeze finance and entrepreneurship into the thing that I actually like. And then I can see, okay, let me learn let me do that with everything that I'm actually interested in. And then see if there's some like underlying qualities or underlying consistencies between these things that I'm actually interested in. Yes, you're learning and reading about the thing that you actually care most about. But in the meantime, you're also learning about business and finance. Some people are interested in business itself. So they read a bunch of different books about business in general, like just business theory, business strategy, right? What did Steve Jobs do? What did Jeff Bezos do? What would Rockefeller do? What would Carnegie do? How did they build Bowl.com? How is that somehow different from what they did with Amazon.com? Because they just care about business, the strategy behind it so much. It doesn't matter what business it is. Any business that's successful. Some people don't care about business unless it's tied to family. They only care about companies that have real legacy. So if you have a new business that's 10, 20, maybe even 30 years old, it's always had the same owner. And even though it's extremely profitable, it's not a family-owned business. It doesn't have family lineage, meaning generations and generations and generations of successful years in business, but being owned by the same family. If it's not that, they're not interested. They only read that. So find your niche or the niches that you're interested in and use those things, those areas of business rather, to help guide you in learning more about business in general to the best of your ability. If, for example, you care about business or you think you should care about business, but you actually care about skiing.
Because you said a couple of episodes earlier, it was like, one should read all the time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I agree completely. It's just that, yeah, concentration. Because I'm not illiterate. Like, I had to read plenty in college. I can do. I can read, but just on my own, I'm trying to find like a way. I was trying to look into like this speed reading course. Shit costs like so much money, thousands and thousands.
Yeah. But speed reading requires more concentration, not less. So right now, you have a certain amount of concentration for a short period of time. Chances are you would have to amplify that concentration, which means your concentration window may actually get smaller because it would have to become more intense. So in the beginning, it's just about reading. It's just about developing the habit of reading. So in the beginning, you're not necessarily trying to read the thing that you believe to be most important. You're trying to develop the habit of reading. So you want to read the thing that you believe to be the most interesting. So you can just develop the muscle. And after you develop the muscle, you can begin to ease into the other things that may actually be of more importance, but not necessarily a page turner. But you got to build up the discipline first. You got to build the muscle first.
I think we spoke about this earlier, but like there's so many like compounding habits for like a healthy life. Sometimes it's hard to like decide on which ones to incorporate.
As many as you can.
Reading, journaling,
Yes.
stretching,
Yes.
working out,
Yes.
healthy eating,
Yes.
meditation.
For some.
There's a lot of health benefits to meditation.
For some.
Going on walks.
That can be part of working out.
Like quote unquote like beauty routines, like just taking care of your skin, your health.
Absolutely.
How do you go about constructing these set of habits in your daily life?
Building one at a time and scheduling them. So, what's the easiest one for you to start with? Let's say, for example, you love sleeping. You understand that you don't get enough of it. You think that's not healthy. Okay, cool. How much sleep do you need? Let's say at the moment you sleep about 5-6 hours on average. You want to get that to 7 or 8. Great. Go to bed earlier. Don't wake up later. Go to bed earlier. Once you create that discipline, do it for 30 days straight. Just go to bed earlier. 30 days straight. What's early? Let's say you want to go to bed 2 hours earlier because you want to go from 5 to 6 hours to 7 to 8 hours. Okay, you don't have to go to bed 2 hours earlier from the first night. Build up 15 minutes at a time. This week, I'm going to go to bed 15 minutes earlier. Next week, I'm going to go to bed 30 minutes earlier. Every night. Following week is an hour. Well, excuse me, the following week is 45 minutes. The week after is an hour. That will get you from 5 to 6 to 6 to 7. Do it for another month. That'll get you from 7 to 8. Hold that for a month. Because just sleeping adequately can improve so many aspects of your life. So it took you 3 months to really get the sleeping habit down. Great. Now stack it. What's the next thing you can do? Yeah. I'm going to bed earlier. I have more energy. What's the next thing you can do that's easy? Perhaps it's hygiene. Right? I'm more energetic. I have more energy to focus on how I look. And so you get into skincare. You get into improving your dental hygiene. You get into taking better care of your hair. Great. Do that for 90 days. See the benefit. Because now you got 6 months of good sleep and 3 months of great skincare. You're going to see some visible improvements with that, chances are. That's inspiring. Then you can pick up the next habit and do the same thing. It seems like a slow grind. It is. But in a year and a half, you can have a completely different life by just habit stacking. So you got to schedule it. You got to know exactly what it is that you're going to do. That's one way. That's not law. That's one way. Some people are extreme, where they adopt 2, 3 habits at a time. Some people they just change their lives overnight. They realize that there's an issue in their lives and they need to go about their lives in a very different manner. They sit at the table, they write down a list of what they would like to do, new habits that they would like to have, and they employ those habits the very next day. All of them. That used to be me. I found that for me it wasn't very sustainable. So I started to do one at a time and stack them. And I saw that over a longer period of time. I saw a lot of benefits. And it was actually sustainable for me. And the more habits that I adopted, the more discipline I gained over time. It's not just one way. There are multiple ways in which you can go about changing your life and habit stacking.
You said that people overestimate what they can do in a month and underestimate what they can do in a year.
I didn't say that. Tony Robbins said that. People overestimate what they can do in a day, and they overestimate what they can do. Overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year. That's not my theory. That's Tony Robbins' theory. Yeah. In my life, I've found that to be true. Really interested in trying to get things done in a day, but typically the tide doesn't turn in a day. It takes some time to gain some momentum. It takes some time to gain some traction. It takes some time to develop the discipline to maintain the habit. It takes some time to learn how to deal with the consequence of that habit. Right? Because oftentimes we talk about changing our habits, but we don't speak very much about the withdrawal symptoms that come along with changing habits. Right? We don't talk about that old habit trying to creep back in. Right? Your subconscious wrestling with that old habit. And the feeling, the physical feeling that you get from not doing the things that you once did. And I'm not speaking about drugs or alcohol. I mean anything. If you're accustomed to waking up at 9 o'clock in the morning, and now you want to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, your body wants to sleep in. Especially if you're not going to bed earlier. You're going to bed at the same time, but you want to wake up earlier. Or you're trying to go to bed earlier, but you're accustomed to going to bed later. Your subconscious is going to fight you. You're going to have withdrawal symptoms of that. You will have withdrawal symptoms. You'll experience withdrawals from migrating from one habit to the other. Your mind and your body becomes conditioned to your current set of habits. If you want to change it, you're going to feel discomfort physically due to that change. You're going to have some negative talk, negative self-talk due to that change. Your ego is going to be trying to trick you to find a way to indulge in that old habit again. Because that old habit has crystallized pathways in your mind. And because of that, it's easier for your body to mimic that old habit than it is to try to create this new habit that you're interested in doing. So you experience withdrawals based on your habits and trying to change those habits.
How do you go about combating that?
Not negotiating with yourself. And through experience, you begin to understand your ego a bit more. You're able to tame your ego a bit more. And if you're not negotiating with yourself, over time, you allow yourself the opportunity to watch yourself and learn yourself a bit more. For example, I may wake up tomorrow and say, I don't feel like going to the gym. I allow myself to have that feeling, and then I go to the gym. In me allowing myself to have that feeling, I can understand that feeling a bit more. I can listen to the noise in my mind that's giving me reasons as to why I shouldn't go to the gym. But because I'm not negotiating, it doesn't matter what's being said, although I leave room for what's being said, because I want to acknowledge what's being said. That doesn't mean that I'm going to obey what's being said. In doing that, I learn a bit more about myself each time. What's the trick that my ego is going to try to play on me today? How is it going to get my body to try to support what it's saying to me today? And how does it feel to combat that today? Some days it's harder than others. And I learn from that as well. And I take note of it so that when it happens again, I can notice it again. I can notice that it's happening. And over time, you just get better at the non-negotiables.
would this be a case of your conscious and your subconscious not being in alignment?
Yes. Absolutely. This is you saying, no matter what happens, I'm going to the gym tomorrow. Give yourself some space. Between 12 and 6, I'm going to the gym. Some wiggle room. Things happen. You might not be able to get there at 12. May not be able to get there at 1. May not be able to get there until 4. But between 12 and 6, I'm going to the gym. You may not get there until 6. But you got there between 12 and 6. So your subconscious is trying to find ways to convince you not to go. It's going to create obstacles, literally. It's going to attract obstacles. Things that look like obstacles to you. And it'll win if you don't attach an emotion to the decision. When you attach an emotion to the decision, it becomes easier to become a non-negotiable. And it also becomes easier for it to become part of your subconscious. Because in changing your subconscious mind begins to fight against itself. Because there's a part of it that's saying one thing, which is old, and it's a part of it that's saying this new thing. The new thing also has the support of your conscious mind. But the old thing has the support of your ego. Way more than your conscious mind does. And so it's a bit of a battle. In the beginning, it's very challenging. At least in my experience, it was. But over time, it became easier. And it was like that with every habit. And through that, you understand the extent of a habit. Like eating, for example. It's not just the cheeseburger that you like. It's also the lamb chop. It's not just the spinach that you don't like. It's also the zucchini. So then you go through all these different foods that you don't like. Some of them you may actually have an allergic reaction to. Your ego uses the allergic reaction as a reason not to eat healthy. You have to notice that. And decide, okay, maybe I don't want to eat the zucchini. That doesn't mean I'm going back to French fries. I'll just try another vegetable. But it also, the fact that you're eating another vegetable doesn't mean deprive yourself of a French fry from time to time. But know that you're only going to eat a small amount of French fries. Because you know in opening this door again, it's a slippery slope. You say, I'm going to eat some French fries, the next thing you know, you go a whole week of French fries, cheeseburgers, milkshakes, and it's like, what happened? So, you don't want to negotiate with yourself. But you also don't want to deprive yourself. But you want to stay away from the French fries long enough to develop a discipline and a strength to reject the French fries after you eat a certain amount of it. If you could have gone 6 months without fries, you know you can go 6 months without fries. So you know you don't need them. So chances are when you have a few of them, you're cool. You know you can walk away from it. And there's strength in knowing you can walk away. And to validate that strength, you walk away. So it's not that you don't overeat because you don't like the French fries. You don't overeat because you want to maintain a new relationship that you're building with yourself.
What are some habits that you had to kick in order to transform?
Food was one of them. Growing up, if you grew up in New York, in the Bronx, you were eating zebra cakes, you were eating Swiss rolls, honey buns, butter crunch cookies, just poison, essentially. Drinking milk, cow milk, not goat milk, cow milk, knowing that you were lactose intolerant. Butter pecan ice cream, pizzas, ramen noodles, not real ramen, ramen noodles that come in a pack, fried foods, pork chops, fried chicken, baked macaroni and cheese, cornbread, heavy on the butter, candy yams. There was a lot of things that I kicked from a food perspective to become healthier. Very little vegetables, very few vitamins. Tap water. There's a lot of it, man. Kool-Aid, that was a big one. Kool-Aid was wild. So, food on its own was a big one. Staying up late, sleeping in, instead of going to bed early, waking up early. Yeah. Well, list of things. But health was a big one. Diet, food was a big one.
What do you think so many people struggle with food in particular?
Dopamine, the dopamine hit. Something tastes good. It almost becomes like a comfort, a sense of comfort for people. More sugar, more salt, more oil. It just becomes all food almost becomes like comfort food. When I say all food, I don't mean healthy food, by the way. Because most people can't afford healthy food that actually tastes good without any real preparation. You can go buy a honey bun, there's no real preparation, just open the wrapper and eat it. And it's like, to some people, it's like, God specifically made that for you. He just dropped that out the sky for you. So it's comfort. Most people are emotional eaters and don't know it. We eat a lot of things that we probably shouldn't eat, and we overeat them. So people are seeking comfort. That's why they have the issue with food. They perceive food as a source of entertainment as opposed to a source of medication, a source of medicine, something we should be using to fuel our bodies,